Hi,
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, just fine for the time being. I have nothing to complain about just yet.
Okay. I'm wondering if I can record this just to.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's no
Okay.
problem at all. I'm on a different computer, so I hope this lasts throughout the whole thing. So, yeah, no problem.
Okay, my name is Malai. I'm in seventh grade, and I'm doing this for my National History Day project. And I'm honored to interview you and ask you questions.
Okay, yeah, that's great. The honor is all mine. Actually, what you're actually doing, believe it or not, is fulfilling the desires of my heart. And that's to make sure that this part of history that's been forgotten about for well over 50 years is brought back into the forefront where it belongs. So you're playing a major role in that. Very good.
Yeah,
Thank you.
of course. I'm so excited. Okay, I'm gonna start asking the questions now.
Okay, that's fine.
Before emergency medical services existed, what was emergency care like for people who were hurt or very sick?
The primary provider at that particular time was the police. If you could imagine a police wagon that normally transports prisoners back and forth to jail and things like that, pulling up to your house and two officers coming in and taking you out on a what they call a canvas cot, which was 2 inches up off the floor. And during that time, once they put you in the back, they closed the door, and both police officers got up front, and away you went to the emergency room. Now, the problem with that is if something happened to you in the back of that wagon, you stopped breathing or your heart stopped beating, there was no one back there to help you. So oftentimes you arrived at the emergency room worse off uh, than you did when they came to get you. That was the norm, not only in the community that I grew up in, but across the country. The police were the primary. It was either the police or funeral home. So you take your pick, um, and that was the norm. So people, there was no 911 system at that time. You dial a 7-digit number. Um, and you talk to a individual that would say, okay, what's your address? What's the problem? Okay, they're on the way. So um, if you take that scenario that I just gave you and put it into a Black neighborhood, one that I grew up in, during that time, and we're going way back, more than likely before you were born, to the 60s, where uh, it was during the civil rights era. So um, in the Black community, this particular community, it was more or less like an underserved, forgotten community. The city of Pittsburgh cared very little about it. There was a lot of vacant housing there. Joblessness was a problem. Uh, there was a lot of bars and things like that there, but um, it didn't really. It wasn't a community like you would see today. There were a lot of vacant buildings and things like that. So public housing was the norm, the projects. So if you can imagine during that time, we had that same issue. You would call the police, they would come and take you to the emergency room. The problem with that is that the police didn't care for the community, and the community didn't trust the police. So at that particular time, um, the police decided whether they wanted to come or not, how long it wanted to take them to get there, or even if they wanted to transport you to the emergency room or not. So, um, in that situation, basically, that was the only thing we could rely on. And since we didn't trust the police, that made it problematic to get back and forth to the emergency room. So, if you still are in that era, poverty was a major problem. Joblessness was a serious issue. Um, so during that time, the federal government knew that racism was running rampant throughout the country. So they started funneling money into different neighborhoods across the country to try to combat racism. And in this community that I lived in Pittsburgh, called the Hill District, was a recipient of a certain amount of that money. And as a result of that, this community had a gentleman by the name of Jim McCoy. He decided to start a community organization called Freedom House Enterprise Incorporated. And it was just like a little storefront, a little raggedy building. And in this building, you could go there if you were looking for work, or you wanted to be trained, or you wanted to register to vote. Um, you could go there. There was even a mini food bank in this rundown facility, and they had trucks that delivered food to the residents of this underserved, neglected community. And also, different foundations started giving money to this organization. And one of the members of the board of directors, his name was Phil Howland. He came up with a vision. And that vision was, if this community organization can deliver food to the residents of this underserved, neglected community, why can't they deliver medical care? Because you had people that couldn't get back and forth to doctor's appointments. And obviously, if you didn't have a car, you couldn't get to the emergency room because cabs wouldn't come there. There was no such thing as Ubers and Lyft and things. So the people, we were held captive in this community. So he came up with this vision that said, if you can deliver food, why can't you deliver medical care? Because the police, we had this adversarial relationship with the police. And so he takes his vision to the local hospital, which was Presbyterian Hospital at that particular time, and it's now UPMC. And they put him in touch with another person that I call innovator, or another visionary. And this gentleman's name was Dr. Peter Safar, Safar. And it was his vision that it wasn't how fast you got that person to the emergency room that determined the outcome, but what was being done for them before they got there. No one believed him. He did all kinds of experiments and research and things, and people just blew him off. So up comes this community organization with a need for the community, and he saw an opportunity to get his vision not only out to the community, but out to the nation. And the organization had one request. He said, I'll teach the members of this community on how to take care of people before they get to the hospital. And they said, okay, every one of them has to be Black. And he agreed to that. So he takes 25 Black men, and he puts us through the most intense training program that had ever been done anywhere in this country. We spent time in the emergency room, not observing, but actually taking care of patients. Time in the intensive care units, the cardiac care unit. We even went to obstetric wards to assist in the delivery of infants. We went into the operating room and we performed procedures on people that were put to sleep. And I'm trying to make this as simple as I can, but oftentimes when you go into an operating room and you have major surgery, they put you to sleep. And not to frighten you, but when they put you to sleep, they stop you from breathing. They give you a medication to stop you from breathing. And then the doctor, who's called an anesthesiologist, puts a tube down your throat, and then he takes over your breathing. That's called tracheal intubation. I am the very first person in this country with a high school education to go into an operating room and perform that procedure on a patient that was asleep and not breathing. It had never been done before.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah, I'm the very first person in this country to go because the procedure was kind of reserved for doctors and anesthesiologists and medical students and people that had all these initials behind their name. All I had was a high school education. I graduated from high school. So all part of my training is that we had practiced in different scenarios with mannequins, and we even practiced on animals and things like that. So by the time I got a call there, it was no big deal. But I didn't know why I was coming there. They said, meet Dr. Saffer at the operating room at 10 o'clock. I showed up there at 10. They sent me into a locker room and put me with the gowns and the hat and the things over your feet and the mask and stuff. And we went into the operating room. And when he opened the door, everything stopped. The surgeon who was getting ready to operate on the patient, he stopped what he was doing and looked up. They had OR technicians that were trying to get all the equipment together. They stopped. The whole room became silent. And they were all looking at me. And what I found out later is that the only reason they were looking at me is because the only time they saw one that looked like me come into an operating room was with a mop or a bucket. But I didn't have that. So the anesthesiologist that I was with, he was chief of the department. He goes over to the doctor who's sitting at the head of the patient. He didn't put him to sleep. The patient's not breathing. He tells him, get up. He gets up. You sit there and intubate the patient. I sat there and I knew all these people were watching me, but I didn't see them at the time. And at that time, failure was not an option. Because had I failed that procedure, paramedics in this country would not be doing it today. Because at the time I did that, we were writing the very first paramedic training manual that every paramedic in the United States was required to read to become a paramedic in this country. We wrote the book. Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
actually like really amazing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we wrote it. So I performed that procedure and it was no big deal. You know, then we went from room to room during the course of that day, putting tubes down people's mouth or throat when they were asleep. Little did I know, less than a week later, now this skill is exclusively for the emergency room or the operating room, nowhere else. I go out into the street and perform it in a person's house. Yeah, it had never been done before. So it's interesting, but it gets better. When our medical director, a doctor by the name of Nancy Caroline, told me to do it, I thought she had lost her mind. I said, I did it in the operating room. Now you're telling me to do it out here in this person. I didn't say that, but I asked her to repeat it because I thought she had lost her mind. And she says, intubate the patient and start an IV on. I had my partner set up the equipment, intubated the patient on the first time, and we transported him to the hospital, to the emergency room. It gets better. When we arrive at the emergency room, remember, it had never been done outside of the hospital at all. No, never. We take the patient into the emergency room. The first thing the doctor says is, who did this? I said, I did. And who are you? I said, I'm John Moon, and I work for Freedom House Ambulance Service. And he said, who told you to do this? I said, our medical director, Dr. Nancy Caroline. And remember, I said we were going into different intensive care units and things during our training. Fortunately for me, that was a nurse that was there, said, well, they're learning that procedure now, they're doing that. So I got challenged by the emergency room doctor because he had never seen it. The paramedics, there was no such thing as paramedics then. So you got this black guy or two black guys coming in with a patient that you didn't put a tube down his throat, something that's reserved for doctors, and all of a sudden you telling me you did it. I don't believe that. So that was a challenge in itself. And now you have to try to, I'm trying to draw you a picture. This community was so accustomed to the police coming to get them and taking them to the hospital. That's all they knew. So all of a sudden, an ambulance shows up with two black guys in white uniforms with afros and beards. They get out and they come in. They're bringing oxygen. They're bringing a heart monitor. They're bringing a BP cuff. They're starting IVs on you. And the family, the people are, well, what are you doing? Why don't you just take them to the emergency room? If something happens to them, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So we had to teach the community that whenever Freedom House's ambulance came, expect that person to come in and take care of them right there in your home. That had never been done before. Second challenge is we also had to teach the emergency rooms that whenever a Freedom House ambulance came to your door, expect that paramedic to tell you how old that person is, what kind of medical problems they have, what kind of physical exam he's done on them, and things like that, what the heart rate is, what the blood pressure is, what the lung sounds are, what his past medical history is, what kind of medical. They were not used to that, particularly by people that look like me. So they laughed and we got offended. So my concern was, why are we learning this? They're not even listening to us. And I was frankly told, if you don't learn to speak the language of the emergency room, no one will ever listen to you. Now, I spoke to a nurse. Our medical director says, go back in the emergency room and find a doctor. And I went and found a doctor and started talking to him in his own language. And he could understand exactly what I was telling him and things like that. And they received it. And that became the norm. So you got this all black service going up and down this community, taking care of these people that look like you and I, that no one else in the city outside of that community gets that kind of care. Everybody else had to rely on the police. So, you know, it became the norm. And if you think about it, we were victims of our own success. And I'll get into that when you ask me your next question.
Okay, so my next question is, when you saw how emergencies were handled at that time, what problem stood out to you the most?
Well, people getting to the hospital alive, number one, or people even getting to the emergency room, because there was no way that they could get there without trained individuals. So we were the very first people in this country, if not the world, to bring the emergency room to your door or to bring it to your home. That's exactly what we were. We were an emergency room on wheels. And everything they did in the hospital's emergency room, except maybe during that time, give blood and take x-rays and put cast on and things like that, we did in your living room or outside on the ground or in the street or on a bus or wherever. We essentially were a mobile intensive care unit on wheels. So we brought the emergency room to you, and by the time we finished taking care of you, there was no need to rush you to the emergency room because we'd already brought it to you. No one else was ever in this country were being treated like these people in this poor, rundown community.
Okay. What made you realize that the system needed to change?
Well, it's interesting too because um, I really didn't know that from the very beginning because I worked in the hospital as an orderly, and I was so used to bathing men and making their beds and changing bedpans and taking them to therapy and stuff. I was content with that until I saw these two guys from this service, from Freedom House, come into the hospital and take a patient home that was being discharged. And I kept looking at them and I watched them and I watched them, and they really didn't say anything. They commanded the attention of that room. They had afros and beards. They had crisp white uniforms on. They had a portable radio that was saying something I couldn't make out. And I just couldn't stop watching them. And I noticed there was a patch on their uniform that said Freedom House Ambulance. Now, you may not be able to identify with this. So when they left, I said, why can't I do that? But I didn't know where it came from. So I went to the yellow pages of the phone book and I found out where their offices were located. Now I'm working in the hospital. I went on my lunch hour, crossed the street to the hospital where the service was stationed at, went up into the office and says, I'm here looking for a job. The guy says, okay, great. In my mind, I've been a hospital orderly for 5 years. I've been moving patients from here to there, changing bedpans, making beds. How difficult could that job be? So I walked in and the guy says, if I showed you a picture of the heart, would you be able to diagram the circulatory system? No. Okay. If I showed you a picture of the lungs, would you be able to label the respiratory system? No. He says, okay, you're not qualified to work here. So once he said that, what he didn't know at that time, I'm sitting there, oh no, he didn't tell me I'm not qualified to work here. So that little voice in the back of my head kept saying, okay, John, this is what you wanted to do. It's up to you to find out how to do it. So I went back to the yellow pages and found a basic, what they call EMT training program now. And I went there for 13 weeks, twice a week, passed that course and got my certificate and went back to Freedom House 3 months later and got hired on the spot. And I left and went down to the uniform store to got those uniforms that I admired. And it was amazing because once I started there, I still worked at the hospital. So I worked two jobs. I was a whole lot younger than I am now. I was probably about 19, 20 years old. I worked 7 to 3 at the hospital and 4 to 12 at Freedom House. I did that for 2 years, 16 hours a day, until I had found my calling. I got so accustomed to taking care of people at their most vulnerable time and their highest need time and in the most critical moments of their life that I resigned from the hospital and worked full time at Freedom House.
Okay. What inspired you to help create a formal emergency medical service?
The community itself, the community itself was um, underserved, neglected. No one cared about it. So someone had to basically step up, and it wasn't just me by myself, so much as it was a group of individuals that saw that a need for this community, that somebody had to do something. Because, like I said, if you had a doctor's appointment, you didn't have a car, you couldn't get a cab, how are you going to get there? So we not only provided emergency care, we even took people back and forth to their doctor's appointments. You have a doctor's appointment tomorrow? Okay. I'm coming to get you at 7:30 for your 8 o'clock appointment. I'll take you to your doctor's office. When you're done, call the office and I'll come back and get you and take you back home. Never been done before.
Okay. What challenges did you face while starting at Freedom House?
A number of challenges. One, a couple of them I told you about the community being receptive uh, to us bringing patients to them and talking to them on their own language. Uh, the police presented an unusual challenge, which was probably the second biggest challenge that we had, because we would arrive on the scene and the police would be there and they would be doing what they normally do. I'm dragging you out of the car and putting you in the back of this wagon. So here, this highly sophisticated, skillful vehicle shows up with all this equipment and all this training, and I see you doing that. I'm saying, wait, hold, no, no. So at that time, you had an all-white police force, and here's this black person telling you you're doing something wrong, so you didn't take kindly to that. So I got cussed out a number of times by the police and threatened. The other challenge is there were calls. We were only allowed to handle calls in our community. There were calls in our community that we weren't getting and the police were taking. So once we found out that they weren't calling us for the calls we should have been getting, we went out and bought a police scanner and we monitored police calls. And when a call came in the Hill District, we would self-dispatch, beat the police on the scene, treat the patient, and pass the police on the way to the emergency room. And the police is just going to the house. And we then got there, treated them, and on the way to the hospital with them. So you take that, and then unfortunately, racism reared its ugly head. There was still situations where people wouldn't allow you to touch them. I want to take your blood pressure, or I want to put leads on your chest so I could look at a picture of your heart. Or no, you don't have to do all that. Don't. So we had to come up with a way to offset that challenge, and it was turned to be ingenious. Okay, ma'am, or sir, if you don't want me to do what I'm trained to do, the chances of you arriving to the emergency alive is starting to decrease the longer we stay here, and I can't do what I'm trained to do to you. And oftentimes they would say, okay, well, go ahead and do what you do then. And so you get accustomed to all these different challenges almost on a day-to-day basis, that it became the norm.
How did you and the rest of Freedom House keep going even when things were difficult?
Through perseverance, resiliency, and determination. Um, we were a group of individuals that we refused to allow our past to determine our future. We decided to rise above it in spite of it. And in doing that, created a system that the world, this I know the United States, if not the world, takes for granted now. We designed the paramedic ambulance that you see riding up and down the street today. The equipment that's on it, we designed that. So every EMS system in this country, the foundation of it rests with a group of Black men from an underserved, neglected community called the Hill District in Pittsburgh. Every ambulance, I don't care where it's located, whether it's in Los Angeles, Miami, Jacksonville, Seattle, Louisiana, wherever it is, the foundation, the training of every paramedic in this country. We wrote the book that says, this is what you do. This is how you do it. This is when you do it. Nobody has ever done that before.
What parts of today's EMS system can be traced back to your work?
They've changed a lot since Freedom House. And I would say, in order to treat a patient, you have to start from the very basics. Is the person conscious? Is the heart beating? Are they breathing? And things like that. Every paramedic service has to go into a person's home, no matter whether it's on their job or on the street or wherever. They have to start with the basics first. And we, in turn, wrote the manual that tells you that this is how you have to do it. This is when you do it. This is how much medications you have to give, and things like that. Um, I'll ask you a question. Maybe you know it. If not, that's okay. This country is having a drug epidemic right now. And how are they treating that? What do they use to treat it?
Um, when people like I heard that I saw that like when people overdose and
Yes,
they use Narcan, you guys created that. You
there
came
you
up with
go.
that.
Yes, we were the first to use Narcan back in 1973. So it's not this wonder drug that every person thinks it is today. It's not. We were the first to take it out of the hospital and out of the operating room to take it into a person's home to treat them for a drug overdose. It had never been done before. Now everybody has Narcan. They got vending machines on the street. The addicts carry it, police carry it, the average citizen. I was at a conference talking, and the person said, "Yeah, I got some Narcan right here." So people carry it. Everybody carries it. It's not this wonder drug that's all of a sudden came on the scene. We're the first to use it.
Were you the first to use it in the hospital or only outside of the hospital?
Well, it was primarily used in the operating room to bring patients out of anesthesia. In the emergency room, it's used to treat overdose. So we took it from there out into a person's home and gave it to them at home, which increased their chances of survival. Because usually when a person overdoses, one of the main causes that they have is they stop breathing because the drug affects your brain. And we, in turn, gives you this drug that decreases the amount of effect that the drug you took affects on your brain, and you start breathing on your own and stuff like that. And it's amazing because none of our drug overdose patients ever woke up in our vehicles. Sounds strange? We didn't want them to wake up because we
Mm.
knew if you woke up, you would get upset that I'd ruin your $25 high. And
Ugh.
so you want to fight and jump out the vehicle and assault me and stuff. So I kind of kept you in an unconscious, dazed, confused state until I could get you into the emergency room where you could be controlled. So I didn't have you back there fighting with me because I didn't wake you up. I just gave you just enough to have you breathe. And if you stop breathing, big deal. That's what I'm there for. I'll breathe for you. Yeah.
Okay. Why was it important to you that the Freedom House EMTs were mostly black men from the community?
Well, one of the issues during that time is that the community itself was kind of pushed aside by the political powers to be, which were predominantly white. Your police force, you may have had one or two black police officers on a force of about 500 or something like that. There was no such thing as diversity and inclusion and things like that didn't exist. So you had a community that was actually being victimized by the political machine, the political powers to be, because you know you guys can stay up there. I don't care anything about you. Um, I may give you a little bit of money every now and then, but you're no good. Half of you all on welfare, and you ain't got no job. So I ain't worrying about you up there. So you survive the best way you can. So that's one of the drawbacks that kind of forced this organization to look out for its community, because it wasn't, at that time, we weren't trying to create a system that everybody uses. We weren't. That was the farthest thing from our mind. We were so busy providing care to this underserved, neglected community that we weren't worrying about nobody else. As long as this community got the care that we wanted them to get, we were content with that.
How did this program create opportunities for the people and their families who would suffer from these emergencies?
Well, a couple of ways. Obviously, it increases the survival rate of people that normally, without the work that we designed, without the work that we were doing, they would obviously die. There's no doubt in my mind that that's exactly, because remember, the mindset of everybody is to get that person to the emergency room as fast as you can. And oftentimes, when you got them there, it was too late. So the best way to prevent that is to bring the emergency room to the person. So since I brought the emergency room to you, there was no reason to rush you off. So it in today's society, people can't even imagine paramedics not being around. They can't. It's and you know, very few people knew that we were doing what we were doing.
How long did it take other communities and states to adopt like the equipment and techniques that you were using?
Well, that's a great question. We operated for 8 years, from 1967 to 1975. And remember, I said we were victims of our own success. We heard a call that came in one of your affluent neighborhoods that had to rely on the police, a predominantly white neighborhood. And the police arrived on the scene, and there was a child struck by a bus. And it was a very traumatic situation. Um, the police panicked. They didn't know what to do. So they called and asked their police dispatcher, "Can you send Freedom House?" And the dispatcher told them, "No, I can't send them because it's not their district." So what happened is we heard that call, and on our own went out of our district into a community that we were not allowed in, treated the child, saved his life, and took him to the hospital. What we didn't know at the time is the community saw it. People are gathering around and they see this sophisticated vehicle show up and these guys treating this child on the street. Uh, they didn't have that. So they complained to the mayor, their political power. How dare you allow those people over there in that rundown welfare, jobless community have better medical care than I do? I voted for you. I contributed to your campaign. You better do something. So the mayor had to bow to the wishes of the people that voted for him. And instead of expanding Freedom House into these other communities, because the Hill District was the only community that had it, he decided to create his own EMS system. And there was no room in it for Freedom House because it was an all Black service. In turn, he brought in an all white service into the community and um, replaced Freedom House. And so one of the things that is disturbing is that we entered into an agreement with the city of Pittsburgh. And one of the agreements we had is that we would handle emergency calls in your business district where your stores and things like that were. But you would have to pay us a certain amount of money. So every year we would expect a check for, say, $25,000, which was a lot of money at that time. And that went toward vehicle repairs and equipment and paying the persons and things like that. In January of 1975, instead of getting a check for 25,000, we got a check for $5,000. We didn't get anything in February. In March, another five. What that did is it forced us to reach out to different foundations and try to get grants and donations to stay afloat. What we didn't know at the time is he was creating his own EMS system. He brought in an all-white EMS system from the suburbs into the city. We get a call one day to come down to the mayor's office, the administration, and in our mind, we're thinking, wow, the mayor's calling us down and we're going to expand it to the community, and Freedom House is going to expand it, all these different communities. He says, the reason I called you down here is that your sirens are making too much noise.
Really?
Yes. Can you put a
Oh my
bell or something
gosh.
on there like an ice cream truck bell?
Because it
So,
was distracting, like, from his business?
mhm. Yeah, he hadn't started it yet, but he was trying to get rid of this service. So he issued an executive order that whenever we went on a call in the business district, we were not allowed to use our sirens. So you're downtown having a heart attack, we get dispatched. We had to stop at the light, wait for it to change, then go to the next light, wait for it to change. And so that was one of his hurdles that he put, challenges, you could call it. The other challenge is he refused to pay us. We thought basically when he called us down there that we were going to expand to the other cities. So we took a plan, say, put a truck here, put one there, put one here, put one there. He says, okay, give me the plan. I'll lay it on my desk there. What we didn't know is he took our plan and gave it to the director of his new service that he was building. And everywhere today that there's a Pittsburgh paramedic unit is the plan that Freedom House wrote to put them in those strategic locations. So we had to make a decision because we were begging for money and stuff like that. So we had to decide, do we continue to struggle and fight and try? So we decided to die a dignified death, turn everything over to the city, and let them take over this ambulance service. We entered into an agreement that the city would take all of the personnel, they would take the vehicles, they would take the equipment. We would not have to undergo any additional training because we were all trained to the highest level and trained by the best. November 3rd of 1975, we show up at different locations where they put these units to work and found out we weren't wanted there. You coming in to an all-white system where you're not allowed to do anything. Now, you're looking at the very first person to perform a procedure that was designed for the operating room in the field. I wasn't allowed to do anything. Couldn't examine patients, couldn't talk on the radio, couldn't drive the vehicle. I was just to sit there, trying to frustrate me to the point where, okay, y'all got this. I don't need to deal with all this mess. I'm out of here. And it worked. 80% of the people that came over Freedom House gave it up. I was one of the few that stayed. And it was by fate because remember, I'm not allowed to do anything. I just have to sit there. I went on a call with the crew that I was working on. We walked in the person's home. The person was unconscious, their heart was not beating, and they weren't breathing. And the crew didn't know what to do. They panicked. So they looked at the person that wasn't allowed to do anything and said, "You take over." So I said, "Well, you do this and you do that, and I'll do this." And we saved the person's life. And that's great. But it had to be kept quiet because I wasn't allowed to do anything. So I had to make a decision. Do I remain this quiet, unnoticed person, or do I step up my game and become more assertive? And I chose to do that. The new service, the paramedics were trained that people that look like you and I didn't have heart attacks and strokes and diabetes. The only problems they would have is drug overdoses and domestic violence and shootings and things like that. Anyone in public housing, you're not going to go in there in the projects and get a stroke or a heart attack. It's always going to be domestic violence or a drug overdose or shooting. So they wouldn't go in there without the police. So I had to challenge them on that. The personnel were dressed just like police officers. Remember, you got an all-white service, so that mindset that I have all this authority came with them. They would put their lights on. If a car ran through a red light, they would pull them over in an ambulance. Uh, the trucks had flashlights on them that were about this long, not to find your way around in the dark, but to use as a weapon because I'm in this urban environment, the most dangerous place in the world. The trucks had handcuffs on them. So I became a troublemaker. I challenged the department on how they were treating African Americans. I got the flashlights taken off the vehicles. The trucks had handcuffs on them. I got them taken off. I start challenging the department on its treatment of patients. And I had made myself a promise that I wanted Pittsburgh EMS to know exactly who John Moon was. So I succeeded at doing that. And I started getting promoted. What I noticed is the department didn't hire anyone that looked like me. Pittsburgh EMS went 10 years without hiring an African American. So I challenged the department on its hiring practices. Okay, it's your problem. You figure out a way to do it. So I had to design the very first diversity recruitment program to balance the racial balance in the department because it was 98% white. So I went out in the community and I recruited people that didn't know what an EMT was or paramedic was, placed them into a training program, got the city to pay them while they were going through training. And once they completed all their training, got the department to hold job vacancies open because I invested in the youth. So once you complete the training, you got a guaranteed job. That was the norm. That was the normal way that Pittsburgh hired all while I was there.
How long would it take to train people who didn't know much about EMTs or all of that?
Probably about a year. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they were getting paid all while they were going through the training and guaranteed a job. So once I left, the department stopped doing that. So the numbers, all while I was there was never an all white class. It was racially balanced all the way through. I made sure of that. And once I left, the troublemaker is gone. So therefore, we can go back to doing things the normal way. And what I didn't know at the time is that I'm out here making all these changes, But what I was doing is sabotaging my own career. You know, I'm no different than anybody else. One day I figured if I work hard and do this and do that and be good, I'm going to continue to get promoted up to the top job. That was never going to happen. I didn't know that at the time because the department was designed to prevent it from happening. We had what I would call the next person up promotional process. So if I'm working here, if a position becomes available above me, I'm automatically given that position. So I'm working, a position comes available above me. The department reached down and got a white male that I had been his boss for 15 years, and I had to report to him. So not only that, they took all my responsibilities and duties away from me and gave them to him, which made him qualified for the next promotion. So I sued the department for racial discrimination in their promotion. And okay, well, since you did this, even though we didn't do anything wrong, we'll promote you, but you're not going to get the pay raise. So they gave me a title without the pay raise and made my job difficult, and I decided to retire. And I had to accept the fact that that wasn't why I was there. I wasn't there to rise up to the top. I was there to open doors and break down barriers and hurdles that when people that looked like me came after me, they would have an opportunity to get in there. And that's exactly what happened. Pittsburgh EMS 4 years ago, or 3 years ago, four, hired its first black chief in the 50-year history of the department. They've always been white males. We have a black female that's running the department now. And you know what? She's someone that I hired during my diversity recruitment program. So I'm no longer there, but my legacy still lives through her.
Do you have any advice for students who want to make a difference in their communities?
Invest in the community. That's what's badly needed nowadays. And I say that because right now there's a shortage of EMS people because the departments have stopped investing in their communities. The diversity blacks in EMS is not what it should be because the departments have stopped investing in their communities. Go out there in the community and take a vehicle, talk to people, go to community uh, meetings, go to community centers, go to job fairs in these communities and start recruiting. I know it works because that's what I did when I was there. So you have to invest in the community to make sure that they know about this as a career path because you can post it on Facebook and TikTok and Snapchat and all these other social media posts. But if I don't read them, that's not telling me much. This talking to you is a prime example of how you can invest in the community. So I'm sure when you stop, when you end this thing, you're going to tell somebody. Yeah. So that's an investment.
Okay. Um, is there anything specific about this story that people often forget or misunderstand?
Oh yeah. People today don't know that the foundation of every EMS system in this country rests on the shoulders of a group of black men that society thought were the least likely to succeed. Every EMS system in this country, I don't care where it is or who it is, in order to become a paramedic, you had to read the book that Freedom House wrote. Guaranteed. So the foundation of every EMS system in this country rests with Freedom House Ambulance Service, no doubt.
Um, what do you hope? What are some highlights about your community, specifically like with the Freedom House EMTs? Like, did you make any friends, or how how did that build like around your
Well,
community?
that's very good because the community, believe it or not, got so accustomed to once we taught them that we were there for them when they would call for assistance. Don't send the police, send Freedom House. That's exactly what they did. So we would. It's interesting that you said that because there were certain restaurants in the hill we would go to eat, and maybe in front of this restaurant there was no parking spots or nothing. We could park our vehicle almost a half a block away, leave the windows down, the engine running, and nobody would touch it. Mm-hmm. No one would touch it. Yeah, that's the type of relationship we had with the community.
Okay,
You wouldn't dare
those
think of doing that today.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's all of my questions, and I really want to show what you guys did through my project and want to make sure people don't ever forget about what you guys did because you guys really revolutionized America and the way that everybody like you've saved so many lives even if it's not through your hands or anything and you changed the past, the
Hmm.
present and the future and I'm really excited to be able to share this with people.
Um, what I can do is I can send you some pictures, a group photo and a photo of me and um, some of the accomplishments I've done. I was invited to um, sit in with the president uh, 2 years ago. Hmm. Because of what we've accomplished and stuff like that. So I will send you a couple of photos that you could add to your project and stuff like that. We There's a couple of documentaries that are out. One is called The First Responders, and the other one is Heroes on Call. Both of them roughly about 28, 27 minutes in duration. So they're online. You can actually look them up online and watch them. Uh, so um, you can, include that in your project. The two documentaries, they both won Emmy Awards. That's how good they were. Yeah. Of course, I starred in both of them. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and I think that's it. Yeah, but I'll definitely send you some photos. You'll probably have them by Monday uh, at the latest. I know your project is due next Thursday or next Friday.
I think it's in 2 weeks. It's on February 19th, so in about 2 weeks.
Okay, so we got time then.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, I'll definitely send you some photos that you could add to your recording or however you're writing it and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
No.
So I've answered them all, huh?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. Um, it's more important to me than it is to you because it gives me an opportunity to get the word about the history of BMS out to the public. And that's what I'm doing now. Okay, so I can't thank you enough for giving me this opportunity to talk with you.
Of course.
Okay,
Um, yeah. Have a good rest of your night.
all right, you do the same. Okay,
Thank you.
tell your dad I said thank you.
Okay.
All right, okay, bye bye.
Bye.